All right, in this short demo, we're going to show you how to convert Kaggle's Telco Churn competition into a Kubeflow pipeline using the KFP SDK. The goal of this competition is to see whether or not we can predict whether or not a client is going to abandon their cell phone provider. That is, we want to be able to see if we can predict the churn attribute. Now, the data set itself is going to be a collection of company clients, and each client is going to have a number of data points describing things that they've subscribed to, annotations that indicate whether or not they've abandoned the company in the past. All the data is going to be stored in plain CSV files with the first line of each file, the column name. Assuming that you've already got Kubeflow deployed, in this case I'm using Richto's Kubeflow as a service, I'm going to navigate over to the Notebooks component and click on New Notebook. Here we're going to want to name our notebook, and we're going to want to bump up the CPUs to 2, and we're going to want to bump up the memory to 2 gigabytes. We can take the default storage, which is going to be 5 gigabytes. And with that, we can take the rest of the defaults and click the Launch button. So once our notebook server is up and running, let's go ahead and connect to it. This is going to bring up the Jupyter Lab interface. And from here, we're going to want to open up a new terminal session. And from here, we want to git clone the Kubeflow/examples repository, and this is going to pull down the directory that we need, which is going to be the Telco Churn project directory. So let's navigate to it, open up the directory, and you can see we've got notebooks, data, and a variety of other files here. So let's go ahead and open up the appropriate notebook, and let's start walking through the notebook. The first thing to do is to upgrade pip, so let's go ahead and do that. Next up, we're going to want to install the KFP SDK, so let's go ahead and do that. And once we've got confirmation that the KFP is installed, let's go ahead and verify the version that we have. And you can see here that we're going to have version 1.8.11 of the KFP SDK. Now, before proceeding, let's go ahead and restart the kernel. And once the kernel's been restarted, we're ready to walk through the balance of the notebook. First up, we want to do our imports. So let's go ahead and run the cell that's going to do our imports. Once that's done, we're ready to move on to the actual pipeline component creation. The first one that we want to create is going to be the download and load dataset component. Then we move on to the step that is going to transform our data. And then we move on to the next step, which is going to be our feature engineering component. And after the feature engineering component, we're going to do a couple of modeling components. The first one's going to be cat boost. And after cat boost, we're going to have XG boost. And the next modeling component is going to be the light GBM component. So let's go ahead and create that one. And then we're ready to move on to our final step, which is going to be the ensembling step. So let's go ahead and run that. And then that takes us to the components or part of the notebook where we need to actually create our lightweight components. And again, we're going to be using Python functions to help in that process. We then want to define the pipeline. We then need to invoke the KFP client in order to then feed the pipeline some arguments and then actually run the pipeline. And then once we run the pipeline, you'll see that we get 2 hyperlinks, experiment details as well as run details. Let's click on the run details hyperlink. And this will take us to the runtime execution graph, where from here we can watch the pipeline execute in real time. You can see that we've already executed our load data step. We then move on to our transform data step, which takes us to our feature engineering step. And then you can see the 3 modeling steps there, light GBM, XG boost, as well as cat boost. And once those steps complete, we move on to our final step, which is the ensembling step. So from here, you can get additional details about the pipeline. For example, if we click on our final step, we get our inputs and our outputs. We click on the visualizations, and here we can see our confusion matrix, plus additional information around logs, events, as well as metadata is all available. And that's it. You've successfully created a Kubeflow pipeline using the KFP SDK for Kaggle's Telco Churn competition.